Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about The Little Mermaid, which is another Disney live-action remake. I've seen most of these now, and I want to make one thing clear right from the get-go here. I am not one of those people who goes into this type of movie wanting to hate it. I haven't generally liked the ones in the past, but that doesn't mean I went into this wanting to hate it. I went in hopeful, maybe a little bit cautiously so, but still, nonetheless, I wanted this to be good. But if I'm being honest, the only Disney live-action remakes that I've genuinely liked are Cinderella, which I thought was surprisingly good, and I think The Jungle Book was alright, maybe a little bit overrated, but the rest just sort of feel like repeated, less sincere versions of the original with less color, with less intrigue. Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Mulan, Aladdin, all of these just sort of feel like Disney scraping the bottom of the barrel for every cent they can get out of these IPs. So my standards when it comes to going into a remake like this is, how does the movie add to what we already saw with the original? Does it add something new? Does it improve on the original in some way? Because if it doesn't, if nothing is executed better in a remake than in the original, then what's the point of remaking it in the first place? It kind of seems like you're just milking it for money. So just to clarify, if you've enjoyed all of the Disney live-action remakes so far, you're probably going to enjoy this one too. And my thoughts on the film aren't necessarily going to sway you one way or the other, and they shouldn't. You should just go into this and have fun like you're expecting to. My point here being that I'm not trying to ruin anybody else's fun with my criticisms. This is just my take on a film that I saw that's a remake of a movie from the past that I really enjoyed in my childhood. And when I say that, I do mean it. The original Little Mermaid, I did watch it quite a bit as a kid. I generally really like it. A lot of the songs are memorable. I even played a couple of them in high school during my band years. But again, went into this generally with pretty middle of the road expectations. I'm not real familiar with Rob Marshall, the director of this, although he did make Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it was On Stranger Tides, which is not one of the better entries. But just to give a little context to what I know about this director, which is very little, I think the main thing that people are going to be wondering going into this is what I was wondering is, does it change anything from the original? Does it feel different? Does it feel like a worthwhile remake? Are there a lot of changes or improvements on things in the original? From what I've gathered, it's not very different story-wise, although I will say I haven't seen the original in quite some time. The story here is generally the same. We have the mermaids and all of the creatures of the sea kind of despising mankind. Mankind despises them mutually. We have Princess Ariel, played by Halle Bailey, and she's really curious, really sort of intuitive, and is curious about humankind, and so she sort of forms this relationship with this guy, Prince Eric. They fall in love, and thus we get this really sincere message about accepting others and not judging an entire group by the actions of one. And that's really strong, and I think it's probably the best thing about the original and why it's still such a great film, especially for kids. Sebastian the Crab, Scuttle, and Flounder are also in this, but they feel like they have a little bit of what I like to call the Lion King syndrome, and by that I mean they're very photorealistic, and that sort of takes the charm away from how anthropomorphic and expressive they were in their animated forms. Because if I'm being honest, I think Sebastian is probably the most memorable character in the original Little Mermaid. He's just so expressive, and that whole scene where they sing Under the Sea is probably one of the most memorable scenes in the film because of how expressive these characters are. So that criticism that I have about The Lion King from 2019 carries over here, in that I think they are doing these characters a disservice by making them photorealistic and trying to make them look like real animals because they can't be as expressive. Ursula is in here as well, played by Melissa McCarthy, and just as sort of a baseline, I generally don't like Melissa McCarthy. I don't think she's very funny, but she's surprisingly good here, and she's also after Ariel for various reasons. If you've seen the original, you know it's pretty much the same here. One big criticism that I do have is that this film is about 45 minutes, I think even more than 45 minutes longer than the original. And I was sort of hoping that they would use that time to really flesh out the characters more, and they do make an attempt at that. The character of Eric is sort of given a little bit more to work with, but I also sort of feel like this extended time just serves to pad out the runtime. There's a song that is sung exclusively by Eric, and it feels like it doesn't really need to be there. Everything is just so stretched out. Like, there's a point in this movie where I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, this thing that happens pretty early on in the original hasn't even happened yet, and we're like an hour into this movie. When is it gonna happen? I don't know. Generally, I give movies a free pass if they're really long, as long as they keep me engaged really well. And there's a point in this movie where I was sort of starting to lose interest because it just felt like the pacing was very poor. And just to touch on the songs real quick, I think they're really entertaining. They're really fun. And visually speaking, the film is very good looking. I've heard a lot of people criticize the CGI in this movie. I don't know what the hell they're talking about because I think the movie looks pretty damn good. Again, it's very photorealistic, so it's very desaturated and muted in terms of colors. It's not as vibrant as the original, obviously, because that's how the ocean really looks, especially if you go to deep depths, which is where a lot of scenes in this film take place. But the musical numbers are really entertaining. Again, it's just that they feel like inferior versions of their animated counterparts. So it's like, I don't see myself going back to revisit this film when I could just revisit the 90s version. I think it came out in the 90s. Where the songs are just a lot more entertaining and vibrant to look at. I don't know, maybe there will be a subset of people out there who prefer a live action version of a story like this. It's just, I have nostalgia for the original, and the fact that that version is allowed to be so much more colorful adds a lot to it for me. The film's one big saving grace here is Halle Bailey, who delivers a genuinely powerful performance and really strong vocals as well. I know a lot of people were doubting her from the get-go. I don't want to get into the whole discourse about the race swap of the character. I don't give a shit about that. Point is, she delivers. She's in a far weaker movie than she deserves, but I thought she did a fantastic job overall. A lot of the other actors are doing a pretty solid job too. Again, this is probably one of my more favorite performances from Melissa McCarthy. But some of her dialogue felt a little bit stiff and wooden. Again, I don't know for sure because I haven't seen it in a while if the dialogue is pretty much the same as in the original. It just sort of came off as a bit stiff and like she was reading off of a script. In fact, a couple of the supporting characters feel that way in this movie. And lastly, and I don't want to get into too much detail just for the fact of not spoiling things for people, but there are a lot of things in this film that don't really make sense. For instance, there's a scene where Ariel sits down with her father and all of her siblings, and they are like all sorts of different ethnicities, and this is a real nitpick, but I'm just curious how exactly that came to be if they have the same parents. I don't know if they're adopted or what. It's just something that I noticed and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make much sense. All in all, I'd compare this to something along the lines of Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast. I think this might be just a sliver better than those two, but generally speaking, it's just kind of average. I really don't want to call it bad because, again, I think it's genuinely great in certain moments. I think some of the scenes where it's just Ariel and her curiosity and sort of infatuation with what else might be out there outside of the ocean is really strong. Some of those scenes had me very engaged. But I did leave the theater feeling like I had just watched an inferior, bloated version of the original that just doesn't have the level of charm that original had because the animal characters aren't as vibrant and the story just doesn't feel as focused and tightly paced. So I'm going to give The Little Mermaid 2.5 out of 5. Again, not terrible, and if you like these live action remakes, you're going to enjoy this too. Just go see it, bring your kids, they'll probably be entertained, although some of the slower patches in the movie I found to be a bit boring. I don't know how much kids will relate to that. But there you have it. Those are my thoughts on The Little Mermaid. Be sure to drop down into the comments and let me know what's your favorite Disney live action remake and what did you think of this one? Where does it fit within your ranking of the ones that we've gotten so far? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe while you're at it if you guys want to see more videos like this, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.